The recent heat wave in the states of Oregon and Washington caused a lot of damage to roadways. In one post on Twitter, a user based in Portland shared photos of a nearby road and said their house began to shake as the road's concrete started to split. The user wrote, "The house started to shake and we thought it was an earthquake. But no, the road was so hot it literally buckled. Here's how it happened." Newsweek reports that roads are buckling and breaking apart from the unprecedented hot weather that's been hitting the Pacific Northwest region of the U.S. In the usually cool Portland, temperatures soared to 47 degrees Celsius on Monday, June 28th. Scientists say the problem is that Oregon's roadways were not designed to survive such heat. These roadways are made of concrete slabs that contract in cold weather and expand in hot weather. The slabs were shaped with gaps between them, and these gaps are there to create room for the concrete when it expands. However, these gaps are only big enough to make room for the kind of expansion that happens during normal temperature highs, and the recent heat wave created temperatures so high that the concrete slabs expanded so much that they pushed against each other, causing the slabs to break and buckle. Roads that were made of asphalt, on the other hand, often became so hot that they became soft like toffee, and thus became deformed by large numbers of heavy vehicles driving over them. Meanwhile, workers ventured out last week in the blistering heat to put cracked concrete and asphalt roadways back together. Steel drawbridges were doused with water to make sure they wouldn't swell shut under the oppressive heat. North of the border, a weather station in Lytton, British Columbia, notched the highest temperature in Canada's recorded history, a mind-melting 121 degrees Fahrenheit, or 49.6 degrees Celsius. Soon after that, the town was destroyed by a wildfire. What's your favorite part of summer? Hanging out at the beach with all your friends? Playing frisbee with all your friends? How about the killer heat waves that have come to destroy us all? If you went for option number 2, the US right now has almost certainly been the place to be for the past few days. Here's what you need to know. A severe heat wave affecting 40 million Americans has seen temperatures over 100 degrees Fahrenheit beat records in Wyoming, Utah, Arizona, and Southern California, according to NBC News. It has two main causes, according to the Associated Press. First, a heat dome, or area of high pressure. Sinking air from the Earth's atmosphere prevents air near the ground from rising. That sinking air operates like a cap, trapping warm ground air in place, according to the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Without rising air, there is also no rain, and nothing to stop hot air from becoming hotter. That high pressure works in combination with a 2-decade dry spell that has sucked moisture out of soil in much of the western United States. Usually, some of the sun's heat evaporates moisture in the soil, but according to the Associated Press, scientists say the western soil is now so dry that the energy is instead used to make the air even warmer. As a consequence of the extreme heat, at least 14 new wildfires broke out this week in Montana and Wyoming alone. Firefighters also fought fires in Arizona and New Mexico, with U.S. Department of Agriculture meteorologist Gina Palma saying these were certainly conditions that we would not normally see in June. Power networks across the country have also been strained due to increased use of air conditioning, according to Reuters. Operators in California asked homeowners across the state to conserve energy in the late afternoon and evening when demand surges. In graphs published on its website, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency showed that heat waves like this are almost 3 times as frequent as they were in the 1960s, increasing steadily for over 60 years. Furthermore, the duration of these heat waves is now almost a full day longer. What we're watching here is climate change, and at least part of it is man-made, according to the Associated Press. A study published last year in the journal Science found that man-made climate change tied to greenhouse gas emissions is responsible for around half of the historic drought that caused the drying out of the soil. Added to this, NASA's website helpfully explains that human activities, such as burning fuel to power factories, cars, and buses, cause the atmosphere to trap more heat than it used to, which increases the Earth's average temperature. Now, of course, heat waves have always occurred. The American Meteorological Society simply defines a heat wave as a period of abnormally and uncomfortably hot and usually humid weather, which we all know was hardly unheard of before. But the point is this: if the Earth's overall average temperature is higher, existing factors like heat domes can more readily push us over into extreme heat, particularly as some defenses against that heat, like the moisture in the soil, are also taken away. Hence, America keeps doing that whole thing where it sets on fire a lot, which it didn't really seem to do as often before. The consequences of all this are not just great action shots of massive fires on TV either. Reuters interviewed one Phoenix resident who described the situation in the US right now as feeling somewhat apocalyptic, and they had a point. According to the WHO, more than 166,000 people in the world died due to extreme temperatures between 1998 and 2017. What's more, between 2030 and 2050, climate change is expected to cause approximately 250,000 additional deaths per year from malnutrition, malaria, diarrhea, and heat stress. The only response to this that is anything less than a collective death wish is a rapid reduction in fossil fuel use. Production of coal, oil, and gas must fall by 6% year-on-year until 2030 to keep global heating under the 1.5 degrees Celsius target agreed in the Paris Accord, according to one UN report. The Telegraph reports that a secretive startup backed by Bill Gates has achieved a solar breakthrough that could really help the planet. The company, called Heliogen, has discovered a way to use artificial intelligence and a field of mirrors to reflect so much sunlight that it generates extreme temperatures above 1,000 degrees Celsius. This is much more heat than traditional solar farms can produce, making it the first version of concentrated solar technology capable of baking cement and melting steel and glass. Taking into account that high-temperature industrial processes like these create more than 20% of global emissions, one realizes how much the technology can help mankind. Heliogen uses computer vision software, automatic edge detection, and other sophisticated technology to train a field of mirrors to reflect solar beams to a very small spot. The idea is to use AI to control hundreds of mirrors and align them with much more precision than before, thereby creating much higher temperatures. An underwater heat blob from the Atlantic is exacerbating the warming of the Arctic Ocean and contributing to the rapid disappearance of Arctic sea ice, according to a study published in the journal Nature Climate Change. The study shows that the amount of heat transported to the Nordic seas and Arctic Ocean by ocean currents has increased dramatically since 2001. This poleward heat transport has been implicated as one possible cause of the warming of the Arctic Ocean and the rapid disappearance of the Arctic sea ice. Warm, salty water is carried from the tropics to the high northern latitudes through a vast ocean current known as the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, or AMOC. The AMOC is part of a global ocean conveyor belt known as the Thermohaline Circulation, or Meridional Overturning Circulation. As warm surface waters travel to regions farther north, they lose heat and gain in salinity as fresh water evaporates. When warm Atlantic water reaches the Arctic, it sinks to form a heat blob because the cool fresh water from the Arctic is less salty and thus more buoyant. This facilitates the formation of sea ice over the ocean. However, the increased transmission of heat to northern latitudes could hinder sea ice formation. Scientists have found hotspots in some parts of the Arctic, such as the Barents Sea, which are starting to more closely resemble the Atlantic. This is happening because warm, salty Atlantic water has begun escaping to the ocean surface, causing warmer ocean temperatures and reducing winter sea ice formation. Scientists call this phenomenon Atlantification. Mongolia's semi-arid plateau may soon become as barren as parts of the American Southwest due to a vicious cycle of heat waves, which exacerbates soil drying and ultimately produces more heat waves, according to a group of climate scientists. Writing in the journal Science, the researchers warned that heat waves and concurrent droughts have increased significantly during the past 2 decades, with troubling implications for the future. Using tree ring data, which offer a glimpse of regional climates from before modern weather logs, the researchers developed heat wave and soil moisture records that suggest recent consecutive years of record high temperatures and droughts have been unprecedented in more than 250 years. According to the study's findings, the record high temperatures in the region are accelerated by soil drying, and together these changes are magnifying the decline of soil water. When soil is wet, evaporation cools air at the surface. However, when soil no longer has any moisture, heat transfers directly to the air. The result is more heat waves, which means more soil water losses, which means more heat waves. So, you're sitting at home one day casually scrolling through Twitter when suddenly you smell something worse than you ever smelled before. Obviously, the first thing you do is accuse whichever housemate has the worst diet. Unless you live alone, then you're gonna have to look at yourself. But what if the smell doesn't go away, even when you go outside? Well, if you're like the residents of the Sidoarjo Regency in eastern Java, Indonesia, you could be unlucky enough to be dealing with a giant mud volcano. Here's what you need to know. 15 years after scalding mud and gas first burst from the ground in Sidoarjo in eastern Java, the flow of foul-smelling mud shows no signs of stopping, according to Channel News Asia. The mud now covers an area of more than 6.5 square kilometers or 2.5 square miles and has forced around 60,000 people to leave the area or adapt to the unpleasant environment, with one study cited by CNA showing that the flow releases 100,000 tons of methane every year. The Guardian reports scientists associated with oil and gas company Lapindo Brantas blame an earthquake in Yogyakarta 280 kilometers or 174 miles away for the flow. However, at a 2008 conference in Cape Town, of 74 independent petroleum geologists, 42 agreed that drilling had caused the mud flow. Pipes have since been used to redirect mud flow into a nearby river, according to CNA. And in 2006, the Sidoarjo Mud Flow Mitigation Center built an embankment around the mud flow site to prevent mud flowing out into surrounding areas. However, issues are still arising. The mud from the burst is about 60,000 to 90,000 cubic meters per day. Patyasina Jeffrey Recchi, head of the Sidoarjo Mud Flow Mitigation Center, told CNA this week, "This is much more than the 30 million per year that can be diverted into the nearby Porong River." The embankment around the site is also prone to leaking, according to an article in the AIP Conference Proceedings Journal, with Patyasina adding to CNA that it was built in a rush. One strange additional element of the story is the arrival of so-called disaster tourists into the area after the mud began to flow. Some residents who worked at factories swallowed up by the mud became tour guides, according to Reuters, ferrying tourists around the area to get a better look. Around 90% of residents affected by the disaster received some form of compensation in its aftermath, with Lapindo Brantas ordered to pay 3.8 trillion rupiah, or $415 million, and the Indonesian government also making contributions. That didn't replace the livelihoods lost, though, and so turning to the tourist industry made sense for locals. Of course, disaster tourism is a little more dubious on the part of the tourists. Is it really right to go and take selfies in an area where people have lost their homes? And isn't it especially messed up to do it when the disaster is still ongoing, where mud is literally still destroying people's lives? Who's to say? But let's just hope these people would be equally as accommodating to people coming to take a look at their destroyed homes if it ever happened to them.
For more news animations and explainers, hit the subscribe and bell button to join the TomoNews family. Thanks for watching.